Welcome to the Bad Roman Podcast. On this show, we talk with veterans, community leaders, Christians and non-Christians as we explore the entanglement of Christians with the state. The Bad Roman Project was created out of the firm belief that as Christians, we are called to follow Christ, not the state. Here is your host, Craig Hargis.
Hey folks, guess who's back? My friend Stephen, the creator of Anarcho-Christian, is back in more ways than one. We had Stephen on way back in the beginning of this podcast, and I've wanted to have him back on ever since. I'm incredibly thankful for and will always feel indebted to him because of his work with Anarcho-Christian. I found Anarcho-Christian at a time when I was just discovering how anarchy fit with my faith, and I was hooked like a starving catfish.
Let's go. Right. Would you rather serve God than serve Caesar? You feel me? Right. I'm just trying to live what he said. I'm just trying to live what he said. I ain't scared. I will take one to the head. Go ahead. So it's safe to say that I'm bad. So it's safe to say that I'm bad. So it's safe to say that I'm bad.
Stephen, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, Craig. Thank you. Thank you for having me back. And yeah, ready to have our discussion today.
This is going to be fun, man, because I think it's something that we talk about, especially in these Christian anarchist circles, quite a bit. We're going to talk about voting, and we're going to talk about voting and how we vote as an anarchist or as a Christian, or we shouldn't be voting, or and we're just going to kind of just flesh it out. I think you and I are pretty close on a lot of these things when we talk about this, but there's some things that we differ on a little bit, and I think it'll be fun to kind of talk about that a little bit because. I don't want to say, you remember when Fox News used to say, "We report, you decide,"
yeah,
which is garbage,
right? Right. They pretend that they're unbiased, and
yeah. So we're going to report and let the listeners decide on their own, right? But not like Fox News does.
Yeah. See, I think that's a really good way to go about it, especially on subjects like this that are contentious and. There are a lot of different opinions out there, and there are a lot of nuances to the subject.
I agree. And it's funny because I'm not even going to say I try because I don't try because I have a bad habit of wanting to just talk to folks and debate folks about this stuff. I won't do it on the show because I like to use it just to where we're having a discussion and people can, like, we're just sitting around having our beer or whatever, and people are eavesdropping in on our conversation and letting folks kind of make their own decision about how this goes about. But this topic to me is very frustrating. I can look at it as an anarchist and understand some of the and we'll get into defensive voting and stuff. I can understand that argument, but as a Christian, to me, there's no way we should be involved with it whatsoever as a Christian, and that's going to rub some folks the wrong way, and that's fine. But I'm okay with that. But before we get into that, I really kind of want to talk to you about your Facebook page because you're back.
Yeah,
your Facebook page is back, and I was really kind of confused when that happened, how that went down, and what happened to that. I know y'all were getting tagged a lot with Facebook, and they were not very well pleased with Anarcho-Christian. I think it had a lot to do with y'all's growth because y'all were exploding, and it seemed to me like once they noticed that. And the outreach, the reach you had with Anarcho-Christian on Facebook.
Yeah, I think it's possible we became a target once we maybe reached a certain level of followers. But yeah, it was taken off, and it was taken off for, I guess, various memes that they ended up flagging, and they didn't even give us a lot of information on which memes it was, and they did not give us a lot of. They didn't give us a lot of ability or options to try to counter it or anything like that. And then it just was taken down, and there wasn't really anything we could do about it. But we've tried since then to do a few different ways to bring it back. And we finally found a workaround. And so we are back. We have the page up, and the page has the same name that it did before, just Anarcho-Christian. And so, yeah, we're back, and we'll just try to start it again.
That's awesome. We've missed you, man. We've missed that because sometimes it feels like it gets lonely out here with the Bad Roman. It seems like our Facebook page always teeters on whether or not Facebook is going to keep us around because, at the bottom where it says boost, where you can boost a post or something, we've been at boost unavailable for months now. Like
really?
Yeah. So I feel like they won't let us boost anything. You can't really promote it that way. So I feel like we're always kind of teetering on that. And it hasn't been so bad. Like, they haven't really flagged us anything lately. Nathan, who handles our social media for the most part, is pretty ornery. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the memes he comes up with are pretty ornery. And so he's kind of always but he'll send me some stuff to make sure it's okay. And sometimes I'm like, well, if I haven't had a 6-pack of beer, then no. But if I had a 6-pack of beer, yeah, go ahead and post it. So
that's the one that they're gonna get you on. So.
And then I hear from our producer, and she's like, "We need to kind of chill out on some of this stuff because," and she's right. Like, as much as I hate to say it, Facebook is our biggest fan base. We're, as far as the amount of people that we have following us is on Facebook. So
it was ours for sure. As well, it was by far more people were following on Facebook than anywhere else. You can see on the website, you can see like where people come to the website from. And so if you have your links up on all of your different social media accounts, it would show, X amount from Facebook and some from Twitter, and whenever they clicked on your link. And it was by far more people were coming to the website through the Facebook links.
Yeah, that's always been really kind of cool to me, to where I can look at those. They do break that down for you. Like, they can break down how many people in what state are following, and how many people in what country, and how many interactions you're getting from folks, how many people are actually going to the website from Facebook. So that's really kind of cool to me that they will show that to us. That being said, they're not always very kind to the Bad Roman, and obviously not to Anarcho-Christian, because they don't like a lot of what we have to say, but that's okay. That's why we're here.
Yeah.
To keep Facebook upset.
Yeah. And so with the new rollout, we're going to try to, mind ourselves a little bit better, and just take a little bit more care so that we can actually have something that doesn't disappear after we put so much work into it.
Well, like I said, I'm glad y'all are back, because like I said, it gets lonely out there sometimes, and we feel like we're fighting a battle by ourselves sometimes out there on Facebook. But it's nice to see Anarcho-Christian back on Facebook, because we could be like tag team partners. I can tag you in, and
right.
I can go take a rest while Anarcho-Christian's taking some heat. Hey folks, Craig here, and I'd like to let y'all know we are always looking for writers to contribute to our blog. I don't care if you have any experience or not. 2 or 3 of our contributors had no prior experience writing, and it turns out they have a real knack for it. Our project coordinator helps them put the articles together, and she publishes them on our website and Facebook page, and you will also have the option to come on the show and go more in depth about your article. So if you like what we're doing at The Bad Roman and would like to try your hand at writing, then send us an email at thebadromanpodcast@gmail.com. We're having a blast with this project, and we would love for you to join us in helping promote it. Now back to the show. All right, so this topic that I mentioned about voting, and I want to come at it from a couple different angles. We'll start as an anarchist, and I've got my own thoughts on it. I know you've got your own thoughts on it, but as an anarchist, should we be engaging the political process as an anarchist, because we've already kind of stepped away from that as an anarchist? I really kind of want you to kind of lay it out and how you feel about it, and then maybe I'll have some rebuttals, and then we'll just kind of go back and forth and see what we get.
Sure. And I think to start, I think you and I are very similar on a personal level on how we feel about things. And then also there's the other aspect of, I guess, what we think we should do, and then the other aspect of what other people should be doing. And I guess that just comes down to looking at a topic to see if those actions are consistent with the philosophy of that topic. Yeah, so you have the anarchist philosophy, and is voting consistent with that? And honestly, it's kind of similar to even the Christian thing. I know we can break it up into 2 different things, like if you have a secular anarchist or a Christian anarchist. I think really with so many Christian anarchists, they find their faith and anarchy. There's no 2 separate things about that. They came to anarchy as their faith grew, and that's my story. You come to this position of rejecting all of these things about the state, and it just was kind of parallel with your faith. And so the answer kind of sometimes is kind of the same thing for both. And is it consistent? I guess gets down to some of those nuances of what's the heart motive, what is the intent with the voting, and what exactly you're voting on. I think that can be broke down to a few different things if we're talking about federal elections, local elections, or even if somehow they gave us the ability to vote on a local bill or something like that, where they can have money go, more of the property taxes go to rebuilding a school gymnasium or a library and things like that. There aren't many times that we get those options to have a say in things like that. And but when you do, usually it comes up on a ballot whenever you go to vote for a local election or some sort of midterm election or something like that.
Yeah, I remember when I first got into libertarian circles, and I'm sure you and I have talked about this, but I was noticing anarchists in these libertarian circles, and I just thought they were insane because it didn't make any sense what they were talking about. If you could pin one down, if you could find one that was not going to be a total snark and have a conversation with you, because anarchists are very snarky. And I don't know if it's because we're anarchists or if we just have that nature about us and it leads us into anarchy. I mean, I don't know where it comes from, but it seems like
the chicken and the egg thing. But yeah.
It seems like every time I've come across an anarchist, there's some snark along the way that, so it without fail, it seems like they're snarky, and I'm guilty of that myself. But I remember engaging these anarchists, and I was still kind of coming out of my neoconservative type way of thinking, understanding libertarian philosophy, and I really enjoyed and really liked the libertarian philosophy. It sounded a lot like how I really felt in my own life, even as a neoconservative, but I was going about it the wrong way. You know what I'm saying? So, but when I was talking to some of these anarchists, and the more like I said, if I could pin one down and they would start answering some questions without being a total jerk to me about it, because I was really trying to understand it, but they would just start saying my roads or, and all this, just being snarky, so I would listen to it. I was like, all right, that's starting to make sense, and I was always a little confused how anarchists even got involved with the Libertarian Party. And I didn't understand how that came to be, but then you realize what's the difference between a libertarian and an anarchist? About 6 months, right? So they came from as being a libertarian into being an anarchist. And when I finally started taking a hold of it and grasping this idea of being an anarchist, I was like, finally, I have found the most principled position that I could find when it comes to politics.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's so frustrating to me when I see people who are claiming to be an anarchist and then go back into politics, joining a libertarian party, running for libertarian political office, running for, I was like, all right, you've already made that leap. Why are you going back in reverse? And one of the things I hear from was, well, we're trying to get a message out. I said, why do you have to go join a political party to do that? I don't understand. Explain it to me, because it doesn't make sense to me. It seems like you're failing your own principles as an anarchist to do that. It seems inconsistent. And you talked about consistency a while ago. That's one thing that bothers me, is because if it's not consistent and you're trying to talk to folks on the outside who are not quite as an anarchist, and then they see other anarchists who are going back and joining these political parties and getting involved with political office and promoting a caucus in a political party and all this stuff, there's no consistency. And if it's not consistent, why would anybody latch onto it? That's why I latched onto anarchy, because it seemed so consistent to me. It seemed so principled. I was like, finally. And so now I feel like I'm just battling anarchists more than I was statist. And it drives me crazy, Stephen, because I can't understand, why are you going in reverse? Let's keep moving forward. You can still talk to folks. You can still have conversations with folks that aren't quite where you're at, but don't go start playing their stupid, silly statist games with them either, because to me, it's inconsistent.
I understand your position with that. And I think that what it does, it kind of gives us, if we were to look at this kind of divided up into two different sides, and then we can go down those divisions into the little subcategories. I look at it like this, when you have this, I guess, predicament or this sort of thought of going one way or the other. Once you've already completed your 6-month, process out of libertarianism and into anarchism, you start looking at it. And probably, I think something that really appeals to you is kind of this, once you've gotten to that point, kind of this taking yourself completely out of the political anything. Even the discussion, and it almost has kind of this monastic feel to it, I think, where I'm just going to be a monk and pull myself away from the sinful world, of politics, of earthly politics, and I'm just going to be here until, God takes me home, I get that. And I do sympathize with that a lot. Personally, I feel that way a lot. Like, I feel like I personally have done so much better the more I have pulled myself out, just completely taken myself out of any feeling that the being politically involved is going to do anything. And it's, to me personally, that's been very good for me and for my mental health of worrying about things. And I feel like, and this is what I think is very appealing for this, is that a lot of us that have that position of just completely removing ourselves, we're able then to completely put our faith on God. And it's not, our faith is on God, but then also we gotta win this election. Or what if the bad guys win the election? What if the greater evil wins the election? I guess just to sum that up, there is that feeling of, like, once you've progressed to a certain point, you are completely removed. And I think that's where that appeals to you and your consistency of being completely out of it, of completely rejecting earthly politics and earthly kingdoms. And that feels like a very consistent move. And so if you go the other side of it, is still there's some sort of participation, whether you're voting defensively, or you're voting for what we could call the lesser of two evils, or you're voting for something that's going to make it better. That would be the other side of it. So that is a whole nother discussion on where can you participate in those different ways, whether you're voting or whether you are becoming some sort of politician in some way. At what point are you crossing over from being a defensive voting versus someone who thinks that they can do good? And then also, I'd say there's even another category of someone who thinks that, like, this is what we need to do because this is right to gain this power, and then make things better, make the world in the image of God or something. That's another thought process. So I guess where we're looking at the actions that you can take when getting involved in some way, like I said, getting involved yourself personally to become a politician, or involving yourself just to defensively vote. Those are the different aspects, I guess, that we can look at why people do that, why anarchists do that. And is it consistent? Is it inconsistent? Is it maybe just somewhere in, like, a neutral ground that some people feel that it's okay, but maybe we can also look at it and say it's okay if you don't do it either, if that makes any sense.
Oh, I get it. And I understand it. I think it's one thing, like, all right, so even as anarchists, we have very strong opinions about politics, about the state. That's why we're anarchists, right? Mm-hmm. So we're going to always have those opinions about this. And we're going to be very outspoken about it because we understand what the state is capable of. We understand how the state operates because it's all on violence.
Right. And therefore it's immoral.
And we're still talking about just the side that should lead us into, let's talk about it as a Christian then, because
how do you get involved in that?
Yeah. So we should be very vocal. We should be out there protesting the state every day, non-violently. Right. But I don't think getting involved, this is where I'm at with it. I don't think getting involved with a political party, and I pick on the Mises Caucus a lot. And you know that. And you've seen our friend Eric Campbell pick on them a lot too. And it's always fun, and we're just being snarks. But I pick on them because I'm at the point now that I don't believe that there are any anarchists in the Libertarian Party. There might be anarchists in libertarian circles, but anarchists involved with a political faction, a political party faction or caucus, I don't believe you're an anarchist. And maybe I'm being too dogmatic about this. I don't know, because it's not consistent to me. Now, one of the things I always hear from, well, we got to get a message out. Come on, man. Y'all have all got podcasts. How many libertarians you know that doesn't have a podcast right now? So why can't you use your podcast to get your message out? Why do you think that you need to use a political party to do this? And here's the other thing, getting back to how we understand the state as being violent. You understand as an anarchist, we're not supposed to be behaving that way. What gives you the right to go tell somebody, even if they choose to be a slave, even if they want to be a slave, what gives you the right to tell them that they can't? You're going to go rule over them in some political office? That's not consistent with anarchy to me. What if they want to be a slave? Let them be a slave. They choose to be a slave.
Yeah, I understand that. And I think that there's motivation. One of the big motivations is, we have this illustration of the country being at like a train and it's headed toward a cliff or something. And the two major political parties they're just kind of competing for having this train just race there even faster to the cliff. And there's a thought that the Libertarian Party could slow it down at least. Something to that effect, I guess, to stick with that analogy.
What's the term? Is it collapsitarian? Is that the term I'm thinking of?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why don't we just let it crash?
Let it crash, and then we'll rebuild faster.
Yeah, we'll figure out something else afterwards.
Yeah, I personally kind of fall into that. I don't know if it's the right thing to do, or if it's just me being like a pessimist. Yeah.
Well, no, I'm with you, man. I mean, I'd like to just kick back, eat some popcorn and watch it burn. I mean, because at this point, that's all that's actually happening.
Yeah.
You're not going to slow it down. I mean, to me, that's how I feel about it. You're not going to slow it down. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, all empires fall. Why are you trying to save the empire? Let it fall.
Yeah, and I personally am a pessimist when it comes to that. But I can see where people kind of get these ideas of where we can do something. I get that because, and this goes back to the messaging thing that you brought up. I mean, historically, we do have a very recent example of a man who ran for a political office, and he did it intentionally more so to get a message out there. And so, which is Ron Paul during his presidential runs. And the majority of people that are in the Libertarian Party or libertarians or even anarchists today, the majority of them were a part of that. Somehow it was Ron Paul's presidential runs that really inspired that change. Where I think I remember your story and mine are very similar, where we weren't directly changed by those events, but we were changed by other people that were changed by those events, or those events kind of stuck in the back of our mind. And as we start down that road of consistency with liberty, that, oh yeah, Ron Paul was right. A lot of us have that. And so we do have this kind of historical example of the phrasing that run for this political party and you can make change, you can get the message out there. And using this political party is very important because people are listening, especially around election times. People pay attention. They pay attention more, even if the whole rest of the year, the last 3 years, libertarians are a joke between themselves or even to the other parties. But you start getting those opportunities and those platforms, and they'll listen to most people will listen to a political party rather than, I guess, just any Joe Blow's, libertarian podcast.
You're right. I was not directly influenced by Ron Paul himself. Because the first time I ever even knew about Ron Paul, I thought he was crazy. I was booing him off the stage, like a lot of the Republicans were on the debate stage. They were booing him off the stage, and I was one of those, watching these debates on TV, and I was like, this guy's unpatriotic. He doesn't support our troops. This guy's a nut job. I will say this about Ron Paul. To me, and I've mentioned this to other folks when they bring up Ron Paul, and like he was getting a message out, and we were brought into the liberty movement because of Ron Paul. And I was like, maybe, but not everybody was. But what Ron Paul did without a doubt is he proved once and for all that the mafia cannot be changed from the inside out.
Yeah.
We have to work on the outside of this and not within the mafia, because you can't do it. And he proved that once and for all. As much as, and I'm grateful for Ron Paul. I'm grateful for the man because he says a lot of great things. I'm very grateful for what he's done, but he proved it once and for all. You cannot change from the inside out. So why are you as an anarchist going through and trying to change the mafia from the inside out when even Ron Paul couldn't do it?
Yeah, that's a good point, because not only was he not able to do it, I guess, with just the general vote and the general society out there, he changed a lot of people, but not nearly enough. But then also we saw some very suspicious activity even within the Republican Party that was blocking him from actually excelling within the party. And had that not happened, he would have reached more people. He could have won the nomination. So yeah, we saw it happen on a couple of different levels that it didn't work, right? And I guess I am sympathetic though to someone who says this time we can make it work. We've got a bigger base right now than Ron Paul had. We have all these people that are woke up to the two-party system and the immorality of the government and all of that good stuff. And I guess the idea is that if we just had another person out there that could speak on the things that he spoke about, it's going to invigorate the audience that's already there and bring in even more people that are still it's not hard to see that people are frustrated with the government this year after the COVID stuff. And then even with, or I probably wasn't supposed to say the C word on.
No, we talk about it all the time.
The COVID stuff and vaccines. And you have a lot of people that are upset right now, with inflation. You have people that are increasingly upset. So there's always that idea. And I think libertarians and Republicans, everyone kind of feels the same way come close to election time, is that right now is a good opportunity for our message to get out there and to get everybody to vote the greater evil and the bad guys out of there.
But this is what I keep running into, is when I'm talking to quote unquote conservatives, they're not looking to the Libertarian Party because they're pissed off at Joe Biden right now. They're thinking Donald Trump's going to come back and save the world. I've heard it more than once. I mean, they honestly think that's fixing to happen. I'm like, and I don't know. I haven't looked this up to know if it's right. There's one, I don't know if it's the 22nd Amendment, but Donald Trump, I think, is not able to run for president again. I don't know if I'm getting that wrong or not. I saw somebody post something about it, and I really didn't look too much into it because I don't care if he runs for office again. But if that's the case, I think it's just all out there beating a drum is nonsense. And it's just, I have a soft heart for libertarians and the struggles and what they are fighting for, because I believe that we should be fighting for liberty. I just think they're going about it the wrong way. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about voting as a Christian. Okay, because I know I agree with you with that. You can it's hard to separate the two, anarchist and Christian. You can't really separate them when you really come to the understanding of the state and as with your faith. And I know I'm a full believer that the early church, if you read the writings of the early church, They were anarchists. They didn't run around calling themselves anarchists because the word didn't exist then, but they were anarchists. Jesus was an anarchist. I'm convinced of that. Now, as a Christian, and we talked about how it's immoral to be involved in this stuff, I think we can separate it a little bit because, and I've said this just off the cuff, just being a snarky anarchist, that I've almost decided to drop that label because it doesn't seem to mean anything anymore. And I'm just going to call myself a Christian because to me, it means the same thing. As a Christian anarchist, how is it justifiable to go and get involved with the state and vote for somebody to rule over your neighbor, even though they're not going to win? We know they're not going to win, but you're still voting for somebody to be in power over your neighbor, when Jesus was very specific when he was talking to us too as Gentiles. It will not be the same among you, how they lord over each other. It's not you. We came to serve, not to be served. So let's talk about that a little bit, because this is where I get really in the weeds about it, because I can battle an anarchist and we can debate this stuff till we're blue in the face, right? But when you get down to, as a Christian, what do you think is moral about going and trying to put somebody in power over your neighbor? That's where I draw the line at it, because I just don't think it's moral at all.
Right. No, and I understand that. As a Christian, we look at some of these aspects of the state that a lot of people don't. They're not there yet, right? They don't understand when we say that the state's immoral. They don't understand what we already know, what we've come to realize, that the state has the monopoly on violence, and that everything should be voluntary. And maybe they're not there yet, right? So they don't understand some of the language that we use. And when it comes to a Christian voting and if they should vote, I think a lot of it comes down to the heart motive. We're directed that way in Scripture a lot, to look at the heart motive of things. And when one of the biggest Scripture passages is 1 Samuel 8. And that's one of the biggest ones that I think really speaks to this topic. And it's where we have God's people demanding that they have a king just like all the other nations, right? So that's their motive there, is to have an earthly king. And God says that demanding this king and having this king is a rejection of me, right? So I think first and foremost, our desire as a Christian, our desire for a king, are we desiring a king? Are we wanting a king? And there are plenty of Christians that, yes, they do. We saw the way that this stuff shaped out with Trump over the last few years, and this, just gross messianic sort of complex that people have. It really is terrible the way that the faith has gotten so entwined with politics, where things within politics become synonymous with our faith. If you're a Republican, it's now synonymous with being a Christian. And that is just first and foremost just terrible. And there's nothing that can be defended for that. A Christian should not be looking to the state in any sort of godly way where we've made the state God.
You mentioned 1 Samuel 8. I'm glad you brought it up, because I was going to get to it, but it leads me to this question. God was very clear that he told Samuel, they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me. So if we can look at that as a Christian anarchist, you understand 1 Samuel 8, what he's saying. If you go to try and vote for somebody to rule over you as your king, or rule over your neighbor as their king, are you rejecting God when you're doing that? And if so, is that a sin? Is it a sin to vote? Because I think this, I had a guy on the show the other day. We haven't released it yet, but I was listening to some other shows he was on, and he was kind of on the fence about it. He's a Christian anarchist, but he's kind of on the fence about whether it's a sin or not. And I tried to pin him down on it, and he still seems to be on the fence about it because he's just not real sure. I know how I feel. I know where I'm at with it. I'm just kind of curious what you think about that.
Well, I think the question becomes, if you are voting, are you demanding a king in your heart? Are you the same people that we see in 1 Samuel 8? And I think that's something that I can't answer for everybody. I think that we could probably all look at instances, especially once the election season starts warming up. I think we're going to see a lot of instances that we could all look to and speculate that that's probably what the motivations that are behind it, and who really is this person's God. But I don't think that it necessarily is. I do sympathize greatly with this idea of defensive voting or voting to put someone in office that can change things. I'm sympathetic. Am I optimistic about it working? No, I'm not. But I can sympathize with someone who is optimistic about it.
You brought up defensive voting. I wanted to talk to you about that as well, because this is, I think, where you and I differ a little bit, because I've seen you say that in the past, like in the Anarcho-Christian group, that you're sympathetic to it. And I understand the argument. Trust me, I really understand this argument that they use, and they always go back to Spooner about defensive voting. Okay. To me, and I think even if you're going to try to vote defensively, you're giving the state some legitimacy at the same time. And you're asking for permission not to be taxed more. To me, it seems like if we just opted out, they would fall under their own weight. And there's a French philosopher that said this. I can't remember. I can't even pronounce his name. I'm not going to try. But basically, what he's saying is, I'm not asking that you bring up arms. I'm paraphrasing. Bring up arms against the tyrant, but don't support them anymore and just watch them fall under their own weight. To me, that seems like the best course of action for Christians and anarchists alike, Christian anarchists, to just watch them fall under their own weight. We go back to the collapsitarian. They're running full steam ahead right off a cliff. Let them go. Because every empire falls. The Roman Empire fell. And to think that the United States empire is not going to fall, come on. We're watching it in real time, in my opinion. We're watching it happen right before our eyes. There's no way they can sustain themselves, in my opinion, at this point. You cannot start creating money out of thin air, go further and further into debt. This guy at work, there was something came up with the Saudis and China about wanted to join forces about, I don't know, some kind of currency or something. He goes, man, are you sure that you don't think that China's our biggest enemy? I said, our biggest enemy is our very own government.
Right.
China's not taking money stealing money out of my paycheck. China's not taxing my truck. China's not taxing my house. China's not over here murdering people. The United States government is. He goes, well, I guess you're right. I can understand that. But he was so freaked out about it. And I'm like, dude, you need to focus. You need to pay attention to what's going on in front of you, right in front of your face. Donald Trump, I told him, I said, Donald Trump pumped $2 trillion of fake money into the economy. And he goes, well, I just know when he was president, we didn't have this inflation. I said, are you telling me that he didn't have a hand in this at all? Come on, man. This didn't start with Joe Biden. Come on.
Yeah, there's a problem within the United States of just general ignorance and being unaware of the things that are really going on and how they work. Everyone can grumble about the government, but a lot of people aren't aware that it is the printing of money that's devaluing our dollar. It's the restrictions that they're always doing for tariffs or for taxes on anything, federal or local taxes. That really is the problem. It always comes down to that. And a lot of people don't understand that. And then two, you couple that with the propaganda that is being pumped out there from the news sources, from the government, where they're saying, inflation. I think just in the last year, we've heard that inflation was actually good. We've heard that it was Putin's fault. we've heard that there's no way that anyone could have ever anticipated this happening, you know, and the public buys it every single time. So we've got two things kind of competing or working together with each other on that.
And I didn't mean to like throw you off track, because I said a whole lot of things when we were talking about defensive voting, and I think I started that with, do you think that it lends some kind of legitimacy to the state with defensive voting?
Sure.
And I kind of went on a rant about something else. And I didn't mean to change that topic at all, because I kind of want to talk about that a little bit.
But no, getting back, I guess you have us anarchists that are more aware of all of those things. And so what's the best way to handle it politically or not politically? And there already is a feeling that we have, I guess we're brought up with in the two-party system, that we have to beat these guys because they're the worst, and that accepting of the lesser of two evil thing. And there is a way that I'm sympathetic to this idea of let's get people in that will just stop things from happening. If we could get someone in that just shuts down the Department of Education, things like that, the CIA, and these are those really lofty dreams that people have of once we get into power. But again, my pessimism shows, because I don't think it'll happen. There's always going to be something is going to stop that progress, in my opinion, because I'm not optimistic about it. But I am sympathetic.
That is something that I always ask folks when they're saying wanting to get involved with politics on the libertarian side, because when they bring that up, what you were just talking about, if we get the right person in, they will put an end to this. I don't believe you. That's because there's no proof, there's no evidence of that whatsoever. I mean, Ron Paul was one man by himself, and you got Thomas Massey, and then you see Rand Paul is not his dad, for sure, So, and you've got folks like Thomas Massey. He says a lot of things, and sometimes I wonder, like, maybe at what point do you get exhausted with this and just walk away and be like, you know what, I think I'm just going to be an anarchist and not be involved with this stuff anymore, because that's got to be exhausting for somebody like Thomas Massey. And it looks like it was exhausting to Ron Paul, but I mean, he tried.
Yeah.
And kudos to him. He's got a lot more staying power than I do, because I can walk, when I can see something that's not going to work, I can walk away from it pretty quick.
Yeah.
But I'm going to argue with you on the way out.
Yeah. And I think that there is some things to be said about whenever something good does happen, whenever taxes are lowered, and again, I'm talking like federally or locally, whenever something, quote, good does happen, I think it's worth saying that it was a good thing. But also, I'm very much like you, and I really like the stories where change happened and things didn't happen simply because people didn't participate. And I think, of course, number one, that would be the best situation if we just had, what is it, like half the country doesn't even vote.
See, I was just thinking that because it reminded me of something that Ron Paul said when he was talking about taxes. And somebody said something about, well, 50% of people in this country don't even pay taxes. He goes, well, we're halfway there.
Right. Yeah.
So, and it reminded me of the same thing, like 50% of this country doesn't even vote. Well, we're halfway there.
Yeah, it really is one of those things where it's the ants. If everyone figured out how powerful they could be by themselves, right? But then that illustration gets used for voting rather than just completely rejecting the whole thing. And there's a lot of fear that's in there that if we do reject the whole thing, then the bad guys are gonna win, and the worst guys are gonna win, right? So we try to pick the lesser evil, or we try to pick someone who maybe like the Libertarian Party, where we reject the Republicans because the Republicans are just the lesser evil, and so we go with the Libertarians, and maybe the Libertarians will either be a good platform for getting those ideas out there, or maybe it'll be an ability to get somebody in there. They can start making these small changes, slow down the train, maybe if the federal train is still going, full speed ahead. Maybe the local stuff will be a little bit easier to handle if our local taxes are better, or if we have a sheriff that is a libertarian and has the same concerns that we do with non-aggression and voluntarism.
That reminds me of my conversation with David Hathaway, that sheriff out of Arizona, because he emailed us. He heard my conversation with Josh Allen about about immigration and stuff, and he emailed us after he listened to that because he feels the same way. But during this email, he said, "I know it seems contradictory. I'm paraphrasing, contradictory to be an anarchist, but also be a sheriff."
Mm.
And I was like, "We can talk about that if you want. I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot, but and he talked about it a little bit. And I understand what he's saying, and I'm like you're sympathetic to certain things. I understand what he's saying. I get it. I just don't believe. I'm so pessimistic about this that I just don't believe him. I don't care if it's a Constitution Party, Libertarian Party, Republican, Democrats. I just don't believe them anymore. There's nothing about it that I find any truth behind. I just don't believe you.
Well, and we don't have any reason to ever believe a politician. They've always shown us that they lie at some point. That's going to happen, and some more than others. To give credit where credit is due. But it's the power corrupts.
Absolutely.
I think that is something. I think a lot of people can get involved in politics with the best intentions. I do believe that. I think that.
Oh, I agree with you. I've seen it. I mean, I was almost there. I mean, right before I moved to Tennessee, man, I was about ready to run for state legislator in Arkansas. I had money backing me. I had a group backing me. They were getting me involved with Republican circles and get me with meetings with these folks. And I was there. And then I got a call about a new job. I thank God every day for that, because it was something that was so frustrating, because I think this guy that I've learned so much from about liberty, Mike Gaddy, I would get so mad at him because he was not showing me any kind of support for it. He goes, "Listen, Craig," he goes, "I think you have the best of intentions, but you can't change the mafia from the inside." And that's stuck in the back of my brain. And he's right. And I think it goes along with like Ron Paul. He had the best of intentions, but he proved once and for all that you can't change the mafia from the inside. I think there's a lot of folks that do run for office with the best of intentions, but once you get involved with the mafia, you're now part of the mafia. Because it's not like Ron Paul had the perfect voting record. I mean, he voted us into war as well. You know what I'm saying? So there's always going to be something. You're not going to be 100% correct, because once you get involved with it, you're still involved with it. And I think that's how you get corrupted.
Yeah, at some point, you're going to start making those exceptions and those compromises. And it seems like that's just the position you're going to be put into. The system is made for that. We have all these bills that are thousands of pages long, and it doesn't tackle just one thing, right? So this is the way the politicians use to get their special projects passed, by putting them into bills that have nothing to do with it, or it's very suspicious that there's any relationship between their special project and something that we have to support because it's called the Patriot Act, and you don't want to be unpatriotic, So then they slide all these things in there, and that's just the way the system works. And so, eventually, it's kind of like the cop thing, right? Like the no good cop sort of thing, where it's like you get into that system and you're either compromising because you're not doing what you should do, or you're not as active doing what you should do, or you're going to get fired. You're going to get voted out of there if you really are doing what you should be doing. The politician thing, to me, is very similar. And maybe somebody has that intent. I will grant that you could have the intent of getting in there, causing a ruckus in the system, and knowing full well that you won't be elected the next time, or something like that. That's where I like to say I am sympathetic to all of these things, and I am, though, pessimistic on if it could actually work. And we see all these events in history that show that it hasn't worked so far. So
Well, yeah, and it reminds me also, like, I see a lot of people celebrating the recent thing with the Supreme Court, the Roe v. Wade stuff, and this is where I'm at. I was like, there's something else going on here. You don't leak it out. You don't leak it out. Come on, man.
Yeah.
I talk to Eric about this all the time. Your average American has the mind of a goldfish, and they cannot remember what happened yesterday.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe the Roe v. Wade thing was great. I don't know, but I think there's something nefarious behind it. I just don't believe you.
Yeah.
I just do not believe you.
I'm in the same boat. When it comes to a big decision like that, big political decision, is there a chance that finally something won out that was correct? Yeah, there's a chance, but just like any time a politician says we're going to lower taxes, they're going to raise it somewhere else. Somehow, some way, that good thing that the government promised you is going to turn into something bad for somebody, and it's going to affect you at some point if it's printing more money, and a year later the dollar is out of control. I could see that.
That's where I'm at too, man. I don't want to keep you too long, and I've been really looking forward to speaking with you. We talk from time to time through text, and we talked on the phone a little bit the other day and stuff. And I always enjoy getting to speak with you because you've become a friend of mine over the past few years since all this started. I appreciate you, and I'm going to get down to Texas. I'm going to come see you in Kayla at some point, and
Good.
I want to go try some of these beers that you're always showing off on Facebook.
Texas has really increased its beer game, in the last 10 years or so, 20 years. It's really good stuff down here. Everybody's brewing some really good beer down here.
You're pretty close to the same area where my dad is. I need to get down there and see him too. So maybe if I can make that trip down there at some point, we'll make a plan to meet up and go eat and
that'd be great.
Have some beers and talk about no king but Christ.
That would be great. And I have enjoyed this opportunity, yeah, because you can't get into little nuances about how people feel about things just through text messages or even Facebook posts. And I
know when you text me the other day, it almost seemed like you were a little worried about the conversation a little bit because I think you saw something I said. I don't know what led to the text, but when I was read it, I was like, I think he's a little worried about this conversation today. That's why I called you. And I was like, no, I know where you're at. I understand your position. And like I said, we're pretty close on a lot of things. And there's a couple of things that we're going to disagree on. And that's fine, man. I'm all about it. I mean, if we can have the conversation and we can keep the conversation going, because I want people to really think about this, because we're heading into the midterms right now.
Mm.
And I am not looking forward to social media
yeah.
during all that. But I want, with this conversation, I want people to just listen. And if you're still going on that path where you think you can change things for the state, listen to what Steve and I have talked about today and take it to heart. I pick on a lot of people about this, and we butt heads quite a bit on this stuff, and that's okay. But I want people to really, I'm doing a series of episodes leading into the midterms intentionally. There's a reason why I'm doing it, because I want people to start looking at this honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned something a while ago, and there's a lot of the stuff going on right now is really based on fear.
Mm-hmm.
And we have already been set free by Christ. Galatians 5:1 tells us Christ set us free, not the United States of America.
Yeah.
And we just get back to that. Just follow him, because he's got our best intentions in mind. I promise you that the state does not.
Yeah.
It's in complete conflict with one another. Before I let you go, why don't you go ahead and plug anything you want, Anarcho-Christian, obviously, but anything you want to talk about, just let it out.
Yeah, so there's the Anarcho-Christian podcast, and I would appreciate any downloads and listens that anyone decides to do with our project there. And I wish I could get more content out there, but how crazy life is. But yeah, if you go to anarchochristian.com, that'll take you to our website that has articles and links to the podcast. And if you already are familiar with the podcast thing, you don't even need to do that. You can just go to your preferred podcast platform, and we should be there. We should be on everything. So if you just type in Anarcho-Christian, one word, that should pop up. And just be glad to have you listening and joining the discussion on our on our social media pages. And if you have any questions for me directly, you can always message me on those platforms, and I'll try the best I can to answer questions about Christianity or anarchism or both.
I remember when I first found Anarcho-Christian, and I started messaging you on your page through Facebook, and you responded pretty quick, and we had a pretty cool conversation. You were saying some things. I was like, wait a second. The rapture's not real. Come on. I don't even know how we got into that conversation when I was trying to understand anarchy, but it did come up.
It was probably me. I've got a bad habit or good habit, depends on how you want to look at it, but a habit of turning everything into a theological discussion. So
No, but I appreciate it. I'm very, very thankful for your work. And it's tough to get content out there sometimes. And it, like you said, it gets pretty busy, but I'm always looking forward to the next podcast that you put out. I
appreciate it.
I listen to it immediately, and I'm looking forward to the next one. So anyway, Stephen, thank you again for coming on, and we'll probably do it again at some point. And
okay.
In the meantime, we'll just talk about No King But Christ and the Anarcho-Christian group or the Bad Roman discussion group, and we'll just keep going back and forth and see if we can change some hearts and minds along the way. That's
what we're trying to do, and thank you for having me on. And I appreciate it. I appreciate everybody listening.
All right, buddy. I'm going to let you get out of here, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Bad Roman Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you find your podcasts to never miss an episode. And while you're at it, if you like what you heard, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes. Or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, it really helps people find us. 100% of donations are given to local charities in Memphis, Tennessee. To learn more about the Bad Roman Project and to find show notes, please visit thebadroman.com.